Peace and love. What up, though? What it do? What's popping? What's cracking? Let's talk about it. Let's build once again. You see the title? We're talking about the slander, and of course, due to, I don't even want to say recent events, but because this shit been going on for a while, it's not just based off of the multitudes of YouTubers who are dragging the so-called conscious community through the mud right now, and basically, you know, labeling every every pro black movement as some mentally unstable individuals. And please forgive me in advance, because I'm gonna try to build on this topic and summarize it to the best of my ability without dragging it and dragging it and dragging it, because like I said, this shit been going on for a minute. As far as for an example, if you've been listening to me, you've heard me refer to various Native American tribes in an attempt to give an example of how we are continuously shitting on each other for no reason. You understand? Like, the various multitudes of federally recognized Native American tribes aren't going through what we are going through as a people. A lot of this is just unnecessary, and it is getting out of hand. The accusations, you have brothers who are actually a part of the conscious community dragging the conscious community through the mud as well, which is confusing people. No different than, once again, you have various movements of American Moors. And I'm saying that because I really don't like to use the word Moorish or Moorish Americans, even though, recognize, I don't have an issue with those of you who are comfortable with using Moorish American. That's your choice. You understand? But what is happening is, once again, it's just not the Pan-Africans versus the Moorish Science Temple of America, more specifically. It's Moors, various movements of Moors talking shit about other Moors. And with this, peace to both of the brothers, Taharka Bey and Dr. Ali Muhammad. You know what I mean? Like, you all know that Taharka Bey refers to himself as a Moorish American, right? Isn't he a grand sheik of a temple? Taharka Bey? Is Taharka Bey a grand sheik of a temple? Okay, I mean, no, let him have it. Okay, so you know for a fact that he's a Moorish American. So you're looking at Dr. Ali Muhammad, slander Taharka, right? As well as in the past, you've seen Dr. Ali Muhammad, once again, he had a debate with Lord Abba. And as well, if I'm not mistaken, he produced some literature dragging the Moorish Science Temple of America through the mud, dragging, peace be upon him, Prophet Noble Drew Ali through the mud, and so on and so forth. Now, this looks maybe appealing, and maybe it's persuasive for those of you who aren't aware that, all you got to do is go to YouTube and listen to, some of Dr. Ali Muhammad's broadcasts. We'll say 2011, 2012, 2006, on up to about maybe 2009 or something. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? But I'm looking at a particular bill that he did, some years ago, and he's referring to himself as Moors. He's referring to us as a nation of people as Moors. Anything that he's referencing to being indigenous, aboriginal, or autochthonous Americans, he's referring to them as Moors. So, Pete, now, 2007, I was a part of a particular organization and various movements. And, we had Taj Tariq Bey, Raz Mariah Bey, Abdullah Mosey, I don't want to mess his name up, Bey, Talib Bey, okay. As well as Sabir Bey, as well as Dr. Ali Muhammad come to Detroit to do a bill, right? And you could feel the tension. For example, my son's grandmother gave a dinner for everybody who was participating as scholars at the lecture, right? And was this my first time? I think this was the first time I met Taj. You know what I'm saying? So I'm sitting in the living room directly across meeting. Neither me or Ali Muhammad is really, you know what I'm saying, too much. I don't want to say I was uncomfortable, but the point being is this. Most of the elders were sitting at the big dining room table eating. So, you know what I'm saying? You're talking 2007. Me and him being somewhat younger, this is just my assumption, because this is the reason that I sat in the living room directly and he sat directly across from him. I don't even remember if I spoke to the brother, you know what I'm saying? But really, he didn't say shit to me and I didn't say shit to him, and now let's get to the lecture. We're at the lecture and it's certain things that he's saying. He's like, most people who are a part of the Moorish paradigm, they don't refer to themselves as black and use the word black. They say shit like black, and black means the absence of light. It means actually meant bleached out on white and all of this. Okay, amongst other things, but in particular, those of us who don't refer to ourselves as Moors, especially those out of the Pan-African movements, they are offended by this movement of eliminating calling ourselves black. And the only definition that any of the Pan-Africans can recall pertaining to us not referring to ourselves as black is a definition that came from the Moorish Science Temple of America, all right, which is black in science means death. And once again, it put the entire so-called conscious community, especially the Pan-Africans, into a tailspin. It was a different, we never heard, outside of maybe our grandparents, not being comfortable with the word black and not wanting to be called black. I can distinctively remember this shit. You understand? But once again, like I always say, if you are okay with being called black, you should also have zero problems with being called a Negro. What's the difference in between somebody calling you black and, 30, 40 years ago, referring to you as a Negro? You got a Spanish word, you got an English word. We are ancient people, right? So, once again, an English word or a Spanish word cannot define an ancient people. At least out of my bloodline, So, let me say this too. We had the dumbest arguments. We argue about shit like, Kemet. The word Kemet means the black land, and Asar is what the perfect black. And how could that be possible? When you're referring to that particular landmass as Kemet, do you know how many thousands of years you're talking about? How long do y'all think the word black has existed? Think about that. All right. So if you're talking about ancient times with the ancestors, is no word black nowhere in existence at that time. Not one. All right. So once again, like I said, we be arguing about dumb shit. And, you know, many of us who think too much or think a whole lot may believe that, or could easily be persuaded to think that this feud in between Taharka and Brother Ali, you know what I'm saying, is like conspired, to raise their following or some shit like that. And the only reason some people would say that is because of how idiotic the shit is. No disrespect. Like I said, I'm here to try and balance the books, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? To eliminate some of the slander on both sides. Not because it's my responsibility, but because right now, in the state that we're in as a people, whether you have knowledge of self or not, let me move this because it's irritating. Whether you have knowledge of self or not, this is putting us in a real bad space, y'all. And I see many people reverting back to making false accusations concerning various movements. So let's just get to it. Taharka Bey, brother, I've been wanting to say this to you for a minute, but I didn't really, put too much energy into it because of the fact that you made the statement that you want to be like Sinetta, right? You said that a whole bunch of times. You want to be like Sinetta. I told y'all multiple times, I don't per se have an issue with Sinetta. It is really too late for many people to have an issue with Sinetta because he's been around for so long. And when you're talking about platforms or conscious knowledge of self, whatever you want to call it, platforms, he been numero uno, and he was numero uno in the only for a nice little, minute, long before YouTube and all of this shit, right? So I'm gonna think, how can I put this? All right, so let's get back to what I've been wanting to say to Taharka. Brother, I know for a fact, Savior's Day here in Detroit, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the elder Taharka Bey was here. And y'all had a sit down in a discussion. And at that point, it go like this. Many of these situations pop off because of a lack of respectable communication, a lack of the ability to be able to dialogue with one another without the biases of your beliefs and your doctrine and your ideologies and shit like that, right? As well, we're not gonna agree on everything, and that's natural. That's to be expected. We're all supposed to be, our own individual men and women. So, okay, like I said, we are not gonna agree on any and everything. That's not gonna happen. But when you start to make accusations and you begin to use a terminology that the oppressor uses against your own people, at that point, I gotta call you out. Why would any melanated man or woman refer to another brother or sister as a paper terrorist, as being a part of some cult? And I'm saying that now, if someone that has various limits and stipulations to it when I say that, because I'm not going to sit here and act like there isn't a cult behavior within some of these movements. You understand? But are we talking about cult behavior as a means of sticking to particular traditions and customs and cultures? Or are we talking about the popularized coin definition of a cult and a cult leader, meaning that these people will never turn left if this leader never turns left. Whatever the leader tells them, they believe it wholeheartedly, and even if they don't, they stick to that particular plan. They do what they're told to do. They pay them dues. You know, you got all other type of weirdo shit going on. Yeah, you know, although we need to, in order to salvage our own movements, we need to come up with a different term to use instead of using that term cult. You know, if people are behaving in a mentally unstable fashion, then you call them out for their actions, in particular, what they did. You don't take information that has helped advance people mentally and chop it all up and say it's no good because the individual who was basically regurgitating and plagiarizing a bunch of maybe ancient texts or law information or whatever it was. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't discredit, you know, what the ancestors brought. It discredits your leader for being a liar. You know, that's how that go. So let's talk about it. Let's get to the main subject at hand. What is this? So let me read a couple of these questions right quick. This is why I'm not active in many temples of the movement. It says moment, but he meant movement, I'm sure. So let's go back some. Like I told you, initially when I met Dr. Ali Muhammad, you know, he came as a package deal along with Taj, Tariq Bey, Raz Mariah Bey, Sabir Bey, and Abdullah. You know, I knew who he was, of course, you know what I'm saying, because I'm a part of the organization who brought him in, right? Like I said, he began to, you know, slowly but surely move away from what was being referred to as the Moorish paradigm, right? And he began to do his own thing. You know, as we fast forward, a lot of the shit, like I said, it confused people because when Ali Muhammad had the ISIS organization, you know, most of the people that he dealt with was into the Moorish science. And the Moorish science paradigm consisted of the teachings as well of, peace be upon her, Empress Verdiasi of the Washita, right? And the same way I had the opportunity to study all I could concerning Washita and study all I could, you know, concerning the Great Seal affairs, you know, whatever from the sextant to the whatever book or package Taj put together, we all had. Excuse me, y'all. Let me think what else was popping. Now, even when you're talking about the cracking the code and the redemption manuals and all of that, like we had all that shit. Even though, peace be upon him, my teacher Bobby told us to stay away from cracking the code. Cracking the code 1, 2, 11, 12, 50, 60. Stay away from that. He said that information wasn't for us. You understand? So, now, this deal, I'll come back to the past in a minute. Specifically, let me say what I've been wanting to say to Taharka right quick. Brother, you get online and you talk about all of these fraudulent documents and this scamming with this paperwork that these scammers, these various Moorish groups are perpetrating on the people, right? I want to say this. When you go back to the beginning of the surge of people having this conversation about sovereignty, birthrights, land rights, a right to travel, status correction, affidavit of fact, affidavit of sovereignty, apostille, all of this shit. You know what I'm saying? What you need to know is this. If you have read any of the templates, because there's millions of them now online, you know for a fact that is nothing in these presentments that are false. Is nothing in these affidavits or these proclamations or declarations that is false information. Anywhere you see a mention of the Sandra Morris Act of 1790, the Clearfield Trust Doctrine, all of this shit is actual shit. Like, are y'all just, this is the thing too. Like I said, when these movements came together, the intent was to return the sovereignty to our people. You know what I mean? And it turned into a scam affair. After it go like this: you're selling documents, you're selling nationality paperwork, you selling IDs to go along with it. You understand? And let's say you do this with 100 brothers and sisters, right? And all of them come to you. You know what I'm saying? Wanting various documents because they have legal matters at hand. Their home may be in foreclosure. You know, the repo man may be looking for their car. They may have violated, you know, a current a probation contract. You understand? All type of shit. You know, child support and just various little issues. And sometimes they may let you know, and sometimes they may not let you know. And this causes a problem for two reasons. Number one, you have an upcoming preliminary hearing or a pretrial or whatever it is, right? And you are going in to the courts of the oppressor expecting for shit to go your way because you know law and you standing on your square and you come in with all your documents. You let the documents precede you even before you got to the court, meaning this: you put them on notice concerning your status and who you are, and you know, maybe you stuck a motion for dismissal in there or some type of affidavit of facts or however you did it, right? And everything is right and exact. But once again, you're going into the lion's den to deal with your oppressors who are currently, out arming us and all of this and that, right? I'm gonna say this now. Say you got 100 brothers and sisters utilizing the same documentation, and they all have court dates, and 50% of the brothers and sisters are able to get their cases dismissed. The other 50% get ridiculed and so on, violated, so on and so forth, right? We got to start examining this shit and understanding why it happened. You know why it happened? It happened for the same reason that I can get pulled over and not have a goddamn issue, you know what I mean, with the police, but somebody else can be detained and it goes left. It's the same shit. We all can't expect to enter into their venue after doing everything that you thought you were supposed to do to detach yourself from the largest, wealthiest criminal organization known to man, which is the United States of America. You understand? So after we witnessed so many brothers and sisters, lose cases, lose homes, lose cars, lose jobs, some people even lost custody of their children, based off of the fact they already had a case. Keep this in mind. Not everybody didn't already have a case that I'm saying lost this, lost that. But I'm saying in particular, I don't know any issues where a brother or a sister came to any Moorish organizations that I know of and, already had their children, and based off of, which this could have happened, based off of them doing things like using a waiver of rights, or a waiver of immunizations and vaccines for their child and all this other shit, refusing to accept or sign a birth record, all of this kind of shit, right? It's who you dealing with. The same way you saw that young lady have her children snatched out of her arms a few weeks ago. We got to stop acting like these are isolated situations, okay? So, once again, Mr. Taharka Bey, none of the documents are fraudulent. How can you say that Ali Muhammad's organization, I don't know, the ARNA, that's the name of his organization now, that those documents are fraudulent, right? His declarations and proclamations and things like this and like that, they fraudulent, right? But at the same time, on the 4th of July, you Negroes be out here toasting it up to the Europeans' Declaration of Independence. But when your own brothers and sisters make declarations of nationality and proclamations of sovereignty and all of this shit, you are a reflection of motherfucking Uncle Sam. You understand? Because you're saying the same thing that they are saying to us, that we don't recognize your documents, we don't recognize your declarations as being a free and sovereign nation. None of that shit. You sound just like them. You telling people, for example, dictating to people how many titles of nobility or noble titles they're allowed to have and which ones they're allowed to utilize and all of this and that. Like, this shit just makes no sense, y'all. It's not. I really can't speak as much in defense for Taharka because I don't know him or know enough about him the way that I know things about Dr. Ali Muhammad. Being that, he's been here a whole bunch of times, and a lot of the brothers and sisters who I used to build with back in the day, like, we didn't stop at just having the 7 documents through the Great Seal. We didn't stop with just nationalizing through Unity Washita, Empire Washita, United Washita. We didn't stop there. Some of us went to ISIS, to Dr. Ali Muhammad, and as well, and joined that particular sovereign movement, right? Now, as well, Dr. Ali Muhammad, his liaison, her name was Asia or something like that. Washita, we had an office here, 2727 2nd Avenue, which is where eventually I put the Indigenous People's Rights office too, but at the time it was Washita's office. And with one of our chiefs, him being a member of ISIS and Washita, he would let the sister Asia utilize the Washita office in order to have ISIS meetings. You know what I mean? So the shit gets sticky. It get really, really sticky. But my concern is that while they running these slander parties, we don't lose sight of what the goal was, which the goal was sovereignty. I'm sorry to break your heart. The goal wasn't to praise Allah. The goal wasn't to go back to Africa. The goal wasn't to bow down to Yahweh. None of those were the goals at all. As well as the goal wasn't to make the leaders of various organizations that produce documents, nationality documents and things like that. It wasn't to make their leaders rich either. Like I said, after so many brothers and sisters weren't getting their statuses honored and, not having their affairs properly tended to, you're getting people are being found guilty of things that aren't even crimes, while being nationalized by various organizations, right? Nations, fuck it. And still was losing cases. Okay? So that should have been the time for these individuals, these leaders to, turn off the faucets and, take the shit back a little bit to see how it wasn't a matter of, okay, let's reconstruct this particular affidavit. Let's reconstruct this particular document. That wasn't the issue. The issue still remains is that these documents that we were utilizing as notifications, none of my people was taking their 7 documents or their 3 documents or whatever it was, whether they were doing a name correction or a religious name change or whatever it was that they were doing. Our documents were filed within the county and within the UCC office in particular as a means of notifications, not a means of looking for recognition from the state of Indiana, the state of Illinois, the state of California. That's not what these movements, that wasn't the purpose of these documents. The purpose of putting these documents, once again, on record within your county or however you were able to do it, the reason we were doing it was to put them on notice that basically this is what it is. It don't have to be what they say it is unless I intend on being a part of their corporate structure. Okay? And we've had enough of that. We had enough of that. So once again, I want everybody to get out of the mode of thinking that, you know, these movements, once again, were intentionally put together in order to scam people who already, don't hold wealth at all. That wasn't the plan. But eventually, once again, like I said, the shit ended up turning into that because people didn't want to stop. You know what I mean? And it's hard to stop when you know, as far as the information and the documentation and your doctrine is right in exact, but once again, the oppressor don't never want to let his people free. Okay? We were having a discussion earlier today about we don't get, well, I just put it like this. I've never heard of a story where, let's say, one of our ancestors purchases their freedom, right? We hear that all the time. You could, purchase your freedom if you wanted to be free and all of this shit, right? So just imagine one of your ancestors going in their pocket, and you know how much $200 was worth in 1822. You know what I'm saying? So they go in their pocket and they pay the owner of the plantation $200 to get free, right? So at that point, do they just walk away? You know goddamn well they don't just walk away. It has to be some type of document. You know what I mean? Some type of receipt, some type of document given to the individual who's purchasing their freedom back, right? Just imagine if it was no documentation. The minute you get 20, 30 miles away from the damn plantation, here come the police, the slave patrol. You know what I mean? 1822. And they disrespecting you. Boy, where you going? Or N-word, where you going? Who owns you? Who's your owner? I'm free. I don't have an owner. Where your paper at? Same shit today. You're minding your business, whipping your whip. Or driving for some of y'all. And here come the slave patrol, the slave catchers, pulling you over. Asking you a bunch of questions. Let me see your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. You explain to me what's the difference in between those actions today and those actions in the past. You understand, when you so-called purchase your freedom, and the minute you get 20, 30 miles, here come a slave catcher, you know what I mean, kidnapping you and maybe taking you to a different plantation. Because ain't nowhere in hell they're trying to take you back to the plantation that you just paid to get your freedom from. Dirty game, but this is business. They've been running business. So once again, Now that we know that they're conducting business, it's simply business to them. We have to enforce us not doing business with them. Being that we know we have a choice. All along, we didn't know we had a fucking choice. And on an individual basis, like, police are the lowest at the they're the scum at the bottom of the motherfucking bucket when you're talking about the foreign military occupation. They at the very bottom, so they hate us more than anybody else. They have no business interacting with any of us unless, once again, it's an emergency situation. They're trying to get you to safety. You know what I mean? Outside of that, they ain't got no business talking to us. Period. Now, there is an actual crime where someone is injured or harmed, and not only do the so-called police witness it, but other men and women and children are there to witness this crime being committed. At that point, they have our permission. Well, they would have our permission to act on our behalf and get this criminal out of our midst. You understand? But this is not how shit be popping off, and y'all know it. We still out here getting robbed and harassed and sexually assaulted and so on. And, you know, for a nice little minute, you know, these Moorish organizations thought that they had the remedy, you know, because, once again, nobody is so dumb to keep purchasing paperwork over and over and over again, with people knowing very well that a lot of people were losing cases, who had upcoming cases and losing things, but people were still coming to get the documents. You know why? Because everything on the documents can be verified simply. So to suggest that our people utilizing the Constitution and Title 28, Title 18, Title 42, whatever the fuck we are scribbling down, that, keep in mind, this is their shit. They made these various statutes and codes and acts and regulations. They made that shit. So when one of us decide to use it in our benefit, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, it don't exist. I'll take this down, y'all. My bad. All of a sudden, it's frivolous and it doesn't exist. You know. Funny shit. Now, say me and my child's father construct an affidavit of parentage in order to put it on record with the county that this is our child. You know, he passed through the vortex on such and such a date and blah blah blah. Affidavit of parentage, right? Almost 99% of y'all would say that's a fraudulent document. But once again, you recognize a state birth certificate or a state birth record, right? But when we utilize, once again, an affidavit of parentage, you say we occult and, you know what I mean? We doing illegal and unlawful things, right? But let me show you how this shit works. When I had my son, of course, I did not sign a birth certificate. But me being versed and prepared for that moment, even before I was even pregnant with him, I knew that whether or not I sign a birth certificate doesn't stop the state of Michigan from creating one anyway. It may not have my consent or me as an informant, you know, involved in that scenario, but they're going to create a birth certificate anyway. They don't even have to know your child's name. They have baby boy royal or some shit like that on a birth certificate that I didn't see until, I want to say, my son was maybe 7. Yeah, because that's when I made the decision to deal with the Social Security Administration on his behalf, right? I'll explain that later. But like I said, they're gonna make the birth certificate anyway. So the state, once I seen it, and what happened was they sent it to a prior address and it came back return to sender. So I actually never received it. Like I said, it wasn't until years later that I saw it after dealing with the Social Security Administration. So what they did, the state of Michigan mailed me an affidavit of parentage for me to fill it out and take it to a notary and have the notary notarize it and mail it back to him, right? Now, you know what the notary is doing? The notary is making note to the fact that she witnessed you put your signature or autograph onto a particular document, all right? I'm not saying that that's their only function, but predominantly that's what their job is, right? So my point is this: if the state of Michigan can construct an affidavit of parentage and y'all see it say the state of Michigan on it, y'all have no fucking problem with it. You will accept it like it was baby Jesus, right? But when your own brothers and sisters create such an affidavit because they don't want the state of Illinois in their business, or they don't want the state of New York in their business, so we construct our own affidavit of fact or our own affidavit of parentage. You know what I mean? Or our own, I don't want to call it there are also other ways that you can go about coming into a union with the opposite sex, which y'all call a marriage, without subjecting yourself to a marriage certificate or a marriage license. And like I said, we start having these conversations and people like, well, you can do that, but the state ain't gonna recognize it. You know why? Because the state ain't a third party in my goddamn affairs, and they don't get to collect a tax off of me. They don't get to collect a fee. They don't get to dictate my assets, right? Y'all got to think before y'all start spitting all the slander, because it don't make no sense. I'm not saying that Taharka Bey is innocent and he never hurt a fly. I don't know what that man has done or hasn't done, And I don't, when people pull up people criminal backgrounds, it depends on what the criminal background states that you have done. But for the most part, I don't too much pay that shit no attention. You know what I mean? Because of the fact that you're talking about prison records and being locked up. Name them. Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Assata Shakur. Name them all. They all have been to prison. Mutulu Shabazz is still. How many brothers and elders that we still have locked up right now? So and we know. You know what I mean? We know that this system, this business that they are running is based off of a capitalist ideals or ideology, so to speak. It don't matter. Somebody can be in the middle of the street, starving to death, and it can be 1,800 billionaires walk by this person who is having difficulties and will not help them. I don't understand that. I don't think it's any way to force me to not think that is sick. That is very sick. The way we treat one another is sickening. Let me quit pausing. Okay, so let's go back. Let's go back to this, what I call, not just the it's the self-hate campaign, and it's also the slander parties, right? I explained what brought on a lot of the heat or hate towards the Moorish movements, which was the fact that the Pan Africans felt as though we were taking away their African holocaust from them by saying that, our people, that the slave ships didn't bring as many people over here that they said they brought. Some people will even tell you that that's a myth. The whole slave ship story is a myth. Uh, what is that? Is that in Nigeria where that, whatever. Okay, you got people saying all kind of shit, right? And once again, this upset particular movements that had already been functioning and getting attention. But once the Moorish information began to flourish, a lot of those other foundations begin to become weak or weakened, which brings rise to the brother Sarah Sutan Seti. He recognized this, especially here in the city of Detroit, because you could not go anywhere and it wasn't a brother or a sister who had filed some type of land patent or tried to construct some type of allodial title for their homes, added a ill or a bay as a suffix or prefix, or prefixes and suffixes to their appellations. And this made it look like the Moorish Science Temple of America was gaining a following, which Taharka Bey, you owe Dr. Ali Muhammad and some of these other brothers and sisters who've been out here pushing this information. The Taj Sharik Bey, you owed all these people a very you owe them gratitude and thanks and all of that shit, because had it not been for the Moorish movements that were not a part of the Moorish Science Temple out here influencing the people in various other movements, the Moorish Science Temple would still be in the predicament it was in 30 years ago, which was nobody was thinking about that shit. Keep it a buck. Like I said, this ain't slander. We got to get this shit right. Like I told y'all earlier, if I don't love myself, I can't love you if I don't love myself. And if you don't love yourself, you can't love me. And that's our situation as a whole. You understand? I can't, as a melanated woman, not show love to other melanated men and women. Now, once again, we have exceptions to the rule, but I'm going to tell y'all this. A lot of these exceptions needed to have been eliminated, needed they ass whooped a long time ago, and shit has slid and went by, and y'all let it slide, and now it's a goddamn epidemic is what it is. Whether we're talking about the child molestation, whether we're talking about people from various movements, leaders of various movements taking advantage of people financially, physically, some of these dudes, mentally. Y'all don't realize that some of these leaders, whether you're talking about a Dwight York, they're responsible for the failure of some very strong movements with some very accurate information and doctrine holding it up. And it gets destroyed because of one sick individual. I'm going to say one sick because, and you can't say the whole organization is sick, but those who are protected and secure these individuals, you know what I'm saying, are some sick individuals too. We got to stop acting as though our people are stupid and they just start following, a particular leader who was giving out a bunch of frivolous, plagiarized information. It's not how it goes. If the information, you know what I'm saying, had no relevance, it's not going to be thousands of people participating. Not of our people, because we got better shit to do. But it's like it's like you meet somebody and everything, damn near everything that they say is a vibe for you. Like, yeah, yeah, yeah. We got to realize when people are speaking in a particular manner in order to get you suit. Because this happens a lot. Some of these people don't even participate in any of the things that they trying to sell you, right? That's definitely a problem. Crazy. I just can't believe it. Crazy, crazy. Then Minister Inky over there instigating and shit. Instigating his ass off. Minister Inky, what is you doing, brother? And, you know, you were one of the first brothers to come out and accuse Dr. Ali Muhammad and I'm not going to even say other dude name, the one that's in trouble right now. The one that's the baby Dr. York. You know what I'm saying? Brother Inky was mad at both of them because, you know what I'm saying, they did various documents for him. And he said it was all bullshit. You know what I'm saying? It didn't help his situation. And like I said, you know, what do we expect? You know what I mean? What exactly do we expect from this regime? You know what I mean? We expect for them to receive a bunch of Jon Snow packages and UCCs and declarations and affidavits and, you know what I mean? Just let us go like that. It's not going to happen like that. They think that they have turned us into a permanent class of property. Prisoners of war, booty, state property, wards of the state. They want that for us forever, which is the very reason why they will recognize every Native American tribe that you can name as a sovereign nation. But the minute that your brothers and sisters say that they sovereign, the same regime say, no, you a Negro, you a black, colored, African American, U.S. citizen, you ain't shit. So once again, for my brothers and sisters to come out and say the same thing, y'all ain't sovereign, you ain't sovereign, you ain't royal, you ain't nothing. You know what I mean? Dumb. Stop doing that. You know? Even some of the brothers and sisters who refer to each other as king and queen will talk that shit about we ain't sovereign, we can't be sovereign. You know what I mean? Like, I wish some of these people would jump off a fucking building somewhere to be honest, because that shit is so embarrassing. You basically saying, fuck my birthrights. Just give me privileges. I'll accept privileges over, you know what I'm saying, my natural rights. You know what I mean? Just give me the other shit. Give me the privileges. You know, that way, you know, every 25 years, if you don't feel like signing the Civil Rights Act and the Voters' Rights Act and all of that shit, I don't even have a voice, is what you're saying. Because it's not that they're saying we don't hear you. What they are saying is y'all don't even have a voice. Shut the fuck up. I bet you was no other fucking people on the earth. No other nation of people on the earth inside of a landmass that's very much a part of their ancestry. I've never heard them say to one another or one say to the other that you ain't sovereign. You can't be sovereign. You understand? You are saying to me, once again, what the foreign invaders are fucking saying to me when they ain't even got no goddamn business being here. So you gonna mimic them. and enforce more servitude onto your people. What type of fucking leader are you? And from now on, let this be known. If you are referring to yourself as a scholar or some type of leader within, you don't have to be a part of any of these so-called conscious community organizations or Moorish organizations or Hebrew Israelite organizations or 5%. You don't have to be a part of none of that shit. You don't. It's not the point. Point being is, the shit is asinine. To go against the grain of fucking progress. I don't see the purpose other than you must hate yourself. Because if you hate me so bad, you must really hate yourself. Because that's why you can't love. Because you don't like your goddamn self. You know. I know it's going to be a bunch of opposing views to what I'm saying, but the proof is in the pudding. Like, really, I want to, let me see. I'm just about to pick up. I don't even know what this is. Let's see. Oh, and I saw something good too. I'm gonna share that. So what is this? This is a declaration of truth and fact. And this is via Washington. I need a brighter light. Y'all know I can't see. So what we have here is Title 18, U.S. Code 241. Y'all know 241, 242. You know what I mean? Title 8, some, Universal Nation Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, which a brother, came at me a few days ago concerning the UN, stating that the United Nations was owned by Rockefeller and all of this shit. I thought he was saying specifically that Washington was owned by Rockefeller, so I told him he was delusional. But actually, he was talking about the United Nations, the organization known as United Nations. What is this? And Pete, when various Moorish organizations start talking about the Declaration of Indigenous Rights and whatnot, people start saying that that's irrelevant, that don't have shit to do with us, that's not going to save us, blah, blah, blah. The UN ain't on our team, which that's a fact. I won't deny that, but as far as calling things fraud that actually exist and works in favor and on the behalf of other nations of people, but just not for us. Stupid. Yeah, but what y'all to say is, forget about the indigenous rights and all of that shit. But then you will have to go back in time and tell Malcolm X, forget about the Human Rights Treaty and the rights of a child to a name and a nationality in 1959. It's like y'all just trying to find reasons to go against the grain of progress. How can you listen to somebody calling, once again, your own people paper terrorists, and they are goddamn nuclear bomb terrorists in this bitch? Explain that to me. And once again, there's nothing fraudulent about any of these documents. You understand? The problem is y'all are looking for acceptance. Y'all looking for them to honor your documents. And when once again, these documents are merely supposed to exist as a notification. What is this? So I'm trying to think before I get up off of here. Because I can go but I'll go back to Dr. Aleem L. Bey and Sarah Susan Seti's debate specifically. And I said this the other day, which we know many of us, this really set the tone for what's going on right now. You know, basically, Seti came with a bunch of modern information. He showed the new Turks, or the Ottoman Byzantine Turks with the fezzes on. Just a lot of modern shit that he showed, that he talked about. So, but he had a beautiful PowerPoint. Shit was on and popping. But Dr. Aleem El Bey, the information that he came with was way more ancient than the information that Sarah Susan Seti came with. It was just it was just Seti's presentation. You know what I'm saying? And the look of $1,000 PowerPoint versus the look of information that's thousands of years old. You know, I don't know what you call that. The thing that Aline was using during the Sarah Susan Seti debate to show his, huh? He didn't really have a PowerPoint presentation. It was like the overhead lamp shit, the Xerox thingy or something. And I'm talking about, was it a regular projector? I don't know, but like I said, it wasn't no $1,000 PowerPoint presentation with the pretty cartoons and all of this shit. It was a bunch of modern information. It wasn't ancient information. And in order to get the original meaning, you got to go to the root. You can't just scrape the surface and think that you are providing some type of thorough scholarship. It's not happening. Oh, God. Just the arrogance. Just the arrogance. You got brothers out here actually talking shit about the brother no light, but they are participating in the same fucking behavior. Same behavior. I don't know how y'all think that, you know, I'm not to be in a polygamous relationship or participate in polygamy. I'm not gonna tell you not to do it or to do it, but what I'm saying to you all is, if you are a part of multiple wives, you're not supposed to be staying in the same house with the other wife or wives and the fucking husband. You're supposed to have your own shit. Period. So when you see these individual so-called scholars in the forefront of what was labeled as a conscious community, and they trying to be baby Malachi Yorks, you know what I mean? Multiple wives, multiple lives. Not a good look. It's not a good look due to the fact that, once again, if you a scholar, you know that our people hold 1/2 of 1% of this nation's wealth, right? So where the fuck in that do you see you see the logic of you housing, you know what I mean? What I'm saying, keeping a bunch of women to your fucking self. The statistics show that we can't afford it. That's what the statistics show. The statistics show that y'all need to be finding something else to do with that. You know what I mean? With that time that you got on your hands. Especially in the conscious community, because once you do that, look who they begin to align you with. Think about some of the elders that participated in that type of behavior, and where are they now? You know, are their children wealthy and well off, or somewhere confused than a motherfucker? I would have to say they somewhere confused. and don't have much clarity about what goes on, you know what I mean, on a corporate side, and as far as dealing with spirituality, you know, they don't want to deal with that because they have to deal with a fucking religious nut. I want to say the JF word so bad. Remember the movie Orphan? Orphan, the little murdering uh short person's woman that looked like a little girl, and she took the Bible with her damn near everywhere she went. And she dropped the Bible while they was in school, and the little white kids was calling her Jesus freak, Jesus freak, Jesus freak. Remember that shit? And she got mad enough to murk a bunch of them. Think about this shit. I'm trying to tell you something. This shit is crazy. Like I say, I don't know a lot about Taharka. You know, I just know he got, once again, brother Inky over there instigating shit. You know what I'm saying? As well as to speaking against various documents that I still utilize to this day. You know what I mean? And like I said, nothing on the documents is fraudulent. You know what I'm saying? Nothing that we do. This shit, it go like this. If you filling out a 1099 OID and all of that shit, where the fuck did you get that form from? Did you construct that form yourself? No, you got the motherfucker from the IRS. That's what had happened. You got it from the IRS. So the IRS gives you a document. You do your due diligence and you know what I mean? Put the proper information on there and you send it back in. Now you getting threats from them based off the fact they don't like what you had to say in that letter. You know, this goes beyond making multiple accusations about their criminal enterprise. You know, so then at that point, a lot of people felt like they became targets and they wish, you know, they never dealt with any of them documents and these documents. And this go for the redemption manual too, because, excuse me, y'all, I heard the brother Inky mention the redemption manual, and you know what I'm saying, how basically all of this information, you know what I'm saying, was conjured up by some scammers and all of this. But once again, when you read redemption manual, whether you're talking about volume 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5, everything that's in there pertaining to law can be verified. Very much so. Now, notice I said everything in there concerning law, because I'm sure there's other shit in there too. But like I say, when it comes to the discussion of the various so-called laws that these people have on the books, and you know how that is a humongous violation of child rights, human rights, and indigenous rights. Excuse me, y'all. So our focus, rather than slandering one another, you know what I'm saying, the focus needs to be on just eliminating us doing business with these people, because their business practices, you know, have put us in fucking danger, jeopardy, whole bunch of negative words, you know. So obviously, oh my God, we are doing shit. obviously, once again, we got to stop doing business with these people because we see what happens. And the shit now, it done got to the point to where, once again, our own brothers and sisters who sit inside various religious organizations or, political people who are politicians and shit that's melanated is coming out against the so-called conscious community and grouping us all into one bag, which makes no sense because, for example, some of us are fucking vegans. Some of us, eat meat or whatever, but don't eat pork. Some of us eat what? Poultry and vegetables, but no red meat, no pork. Like, we not all the fucking same. It's like me. How often do you see me with a turban on? And I know for a fact that's like the highest of the high when it comes to sovereignty and nobility. But being that most brothers and sisters, once again, who deal with more science, don't even fucking know that. They don't know that the Bey, Dey, Ali, Al are titles of nobility. They don't know that turban represents sovereignty and nobility. They don't know that that tarbush or fez represents sovereignty and nobility and royalty, and you can't fuck with we. So once again, I didn't take light to Ali Muhammad coming at Noble Drew Ali in the Moors out of the Moors Science Temple of America the way that he did, being that was a part of the foundation that he was standing on. Once again, many of us was introduced to him by way of Taj Tariq Bey and so on and so forth. We recognize that he was a part of the Nation of Islam as well. And that's fine. I don't take issue with that, even though in return, if somebody wanted to take his teacher, peace be upon him, Elijah Muhammad, and drag him through the motherfucking mud, he wouldn't like that shit at all. So I really don't see the need to take a Noble Drew Ali and fucking drag him through the mud. You know what I'm saying? And I could almost say the same about Elijah Muhammad because he gave a lot, but at the same time, he was another one of them Negroes that was trying to have 6 and 10 fucking wives, while 2 doors down from you, there are women and children starving. There's women getting beaten, all kind of shit. And if these women and men aren't willing to accept Islam and Allah as they Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and all of that shit, you can't help them, right? So obviously you didn't love yourself enough to love them. That's what I'm on. If I can't love myself, I can't love you. And if you don't love yourself, you can't love me. Facts. This shit go back so far, y'all. I don't even, like I said, I could go all the way back to 1999, really, with this story, and begin from there and come, come forward with it. Because it's a lot. I'm sitting here, I'm looking at my TV screen, I'm looking at all of this shit, and I'm like, I'm not mentally even ready to take myself through this fucking roller coaster. But know that any and everything that I said this evening is 100% fact. No, no extra, no none of that. None of that. No doing too much, none of that. Just everything I said, you know what I mean? So once again, it's confusing the people. Y'all confusing the people with slandering one another. You know what I mean? And Ali Muhammad, brother, you start confusing people a long time ago when you start talking against Moors, when once again we all know that you came in on a Moorish science. You came in on a Moorish paradigm. Like, I got a whole stack of your DVDs starting from 2006 probably up until I stopped dealing with the DVDs. Y'all gotta cut this shit out, especially right now. If you're mad enough and angry enough at one another to want to put the boxing gloves on and get in the ring, we support that. I would much rather y'all go ahead and duke it out than for the back and forth and the slander and, you want to call people, you want to say people are using sovereign citizen ideology, but shit, how much documents, you know what I'm saying, you done actually prostituted out here to even say some shit like that? I'm talking about both of y'all, not really. Oh, excuse me, y'all. Just what that plant life do for you. How your ass tired when you ain't supposed to be tired. So pretty much, it's a fucking tit for tat like little ass kids right now is not the answer, y'all. Not the answer at all. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I'm a firm participant in utilizing all available weapons in order to keep me and mine safe and secure. And what I mean by all available weapons, you know what I'm saying? If it's a must for me to put a suit against an officer that's violating me, that's what I'm supposed to do. All available weapons, affidavits, declarations, proclamation, nationality, ID, whatever it is, you know what I mean, is what we supposed to be participating in. Not this fuck shit, not this back and forth like two little girls on a fucking cheerleading squad. Like, that shit is so whack. And hours, for hours? Y'all can sit down and talk about each other like that for hours? Make me want to just, I don't even know, not even fucking look at another YouTube video ever. I'm just back and forth. So weird that, before I get out of here, right quick. My bad, y'all. They doing too much. Making us work too much.
Doing these sessions.
Are you kidding?
On this particular issue, to prove that the so-called African American is a lineage of people that are the oldest people on the planet. And it was through the conquering of this particular lineage of people, hypothesis is that all of the above, this and research, which is in the form of books, is outside of the so-called United States of America. So those who don't travel, got a problem. Because you can't get literature, because most literature, or the literature that I'm talking about, you can't even get in the United States of America. So we're going to discuss where did humanity originate, or what are the oldest civilizations and where are they? Where are the oldest writings at, the oldest glyph writings, the oldest calendars, right? The oldest pyramids, where are they? The oldest governmental structures, where are they? And what kind of evidence or information will we bring up? Like I said, we're going to give a lot of sources. Now, our preliminary hypothesis is that all of the above originated right here on the landmass that we call America, which is broken up into North, South, and Central America. And that would not be taken well by anybody who is in orthodox science. It won't be taken well by a so-called Afrocentric community and the scholars within that particular community. It might not be taken well by anybody, but that's all right. Truth stands as truth. It doesn't need your agreement. All right, so we're going to look at this information and peruse through it, and we're going to make it very practical, because the practical reality that I'm going to prove during these sessions on this particular history is to prove that the so-called African American is of a lineage of people that are the oldest people on the planet. And it was through the conquering of this particular lineage of people that this minority that we call the white race was able to conquer the rest of the globe. We gave the rest of the globe civilization. We gave them mathematics. We gave them engineering. We gave them the ability to learn how to communicate in writing. We gave them the world's first civilization. And the world's oldest civilizations originate in America, and they are what we would conventionally use phonetically as a word called or use Moorish civilization. All right, and we found the civilizations in various parts of the planet. Oldest civilizations originate in America, and they are what we would conventionally use phonetically as a word called or use Moorish civilization. Oldest civilizations originate in America, and they are what we would conventionally use phonetically as a word called or use Moorish civilization. All right, oldest civilizations originate in America, and they are what we would conventionally use phonetically as a word called or use Moorish civilization. All right.
So that's your boy Ali Muhammad, saying that the oldest people in the Americas are known as the Moorish civilization. What did he just say? Do I need to rewind it again? No, my memory ain't about that.
Gave them the ability to learn how to communicate in writing. He gave them the world's first civilization. And the world's oldest civilizations originate in America, and they are what we would conventionally use phonetically as a word called or use Moorish civilization. All right, and we found the civilizations in various parts of the planet, and we've been off of this planet, and a lot of the evidence is coming out that is very mathematical, not some new age speculation. I'm not talking about that kind of information. David Icke and all these other guys. I'm talking about serious math and serious science. And we need our brothers and sisters who are in these technical fields to begin to get a hold of some of this ancient information and the new education that we have to offer in ISIS, so you can make sense out of what you're doing, because everything that you're doing should be for your own birthrights and your own nationality. None of it should be for the suppression of information that continues to go on. So we're gonna start off with some books. And so let's jump into the information, some books that you need that we can give to you. Some books that are outside of the United States of America that you can't get. The first one is a book by a man named Javier Cabrera Darquea. This book is called The Message of the Engraved Stones of Ica in Peru. Now, this book you can't buy in the United States of America. You have to either go to Peru or go to their museum in Peru, in Ica, Peru, to get this particular book. And this particular book you won't find online anywhere except for a few websites that have some pictures and depictions of what he has in the book. Now, why the book is important is because this is one of the books that I'm going to use tonight, and the actual materials from the museum to show the antiquity of the age of the people that we call Amaru, all right, who are the oldest tribe in the Americas, whose descendants are the so-called Olmec and the so-called Maya. Became the so-called Cherokee, Choctaw, Lenape, on down the line, who are misnomered as African American, Negroes, Black folk, all of those terms that don't denote or tell them who they are. They might tell you who they are phenotypically, which is great. Okay, you Black folk in North America. And if you check the records, the so-called Negroes are the old, or the Indios are the oldest people. And they are actually discussing us when we're discussing these terms, but we have not known a lot of our history. Most of the time we want to study history of Black folk in America, we jump right across the Atlantic Ocean and land in Africa and start trying to learn about ourselves. When in fact, Egypt only has 88 pyramids. There are more pyramids in one Mayan site in the Yucatan than are in all of Egypt. All right? We have thousands of pyramid sites and mound sites. In fact, the most sites for pyramids and mounds in the world are in Central and North America. And they are anywhere on the planet. If you want to get in a plane and jump over to China and Middle East and all these other places to search for your history when it's right around the corner. All right, so we have to understand where we are. And we don't understand where we are, so we got to get it. So this book right here that I'm going to use later is going to show and break up this whole 200,000 year myth about how humanity originated in Africa and walked out of Africa into all the other countries. That is the biggest hoax that has ever been played on history. In fact, during the time that they alleged this particular thing that's going on in Africa, we had people in this part of the planet who not only were building pyramids and had civilizations, but were leaving records intentionally for us to have knowledge of who they were. All right, and I'm talking real ancient history. We're going to break down how archaeologists break down history in their orthodox style to show how old this information is. Another book, Forbidden Archaeology. Now you can get this book in the United States of America. It's called The Hidden History of the Human Race, Forbidden Archaeology by Michael A. Primo, all right, and Richard L. Thompson. Excellent book. I'm going to use some of it to dispel this whole theory of the hominid, and we originated from the hominid, and they're the oldest. And all these theories that, oh yeah, we found these almost half-ape, half-monkey individuals, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Australopithecus, that we descended from. The ancient records say a whole different story. When you read the records of our records in South America or the Indus Valley or even Egypt and Kemet, none of our ancestors said we originated from monkeys. So all of our great scholars, they're great, but a scholar like Sheikh Anta Diop, Dr. Ben, Ivan Van Sertima, they gave us a wealth of information, and we are proud of them for what they did, and we honor them as deified ancestors. However, we have to have the scrutiny to dispel the parts that don't go along with our Aboriginal records, and that part does not go along. In fact, our people wrote about these particular creatures that as if they lived during the same time that these creatures lived, and they talked about how they got like that. Well, now we are trusting these foreign archaeologists to tell us about our history because we're illiterate and we can't read our languages or interpret our languages. And when we go to white schools, they make us, scholars for the purpose of continuing colonization. All right, so that's important that we get that book. Another book that is good for our study is Africans and Native Americans, the Language of Race and the Evolution of Red and Black Peoples by Jack D. Forbes. The reason why I'm pulling this book out is because if you want to get the first-hand resources when the Europeans first came to the Americas and who they saw, you need to get this book because he went to Spain and other places to look over the Jesuit letters. The Jesuit letters are the letters left by the Portuguese and the Spanish missionaries who first came during the Columbus and the so-called Amerigo Vespucci phases. And he records that the first people that they encountered, they termed Negroes. So the first Americans were Negroes, which means phenotypically they were describing a dark black race of people on this particular landmass. And they distinguished between the Negroes in so-called Africa by saying Negroes de Guine as opposed to Negroes de Terra, which means that Negroes de Terra were the black folk in this hemisphere as they saw it, and Negroes de Guine were the black folk in Africa as they saw it. And also, we're going to go over the history of the slave trade to show you the real history of the slave trade. We have this erroneous idea that millions and millions of our ancestors were brought to Africa, were brought from Africa to America, which is a joke. And we don't know that the slave trade started by black people being taken from the Americas into Europe. That's the first phase of the slave trade that you don't learn about. You learn about the third phase. You learn it about it in an erroneous fashion. So that's a good book that breaks down that whole history of our being on this landmass. The next book, that's a good book, is called The American Discovery of Europe. This is also by Jack D. Forbes. And if you notice, it sounds kind of off key. What do you mean, the American Discovery of Europe? White folks try to say that they discovered America. When we were here, have been here for eons of time. And we had other races from Asia that came in as invaders prior to the white folks. Now they're on reservations calling themselves the indigenous people. White folks are the foreign invaders that have taken, the minority who have taken over the land, and all of the black people believe that they came over here on ships. But then if you go to Mesoamerica thousands of years ago, you'll see glyphs about people all over Mesoamerica. In fact, we're the only ones that you see. And being that we're the only ones that we see, if I go to a place like Bonaparte in Mexico, and I see pictures of the so-called Mayans, and they look like our grandmothers, and I look like I'm walking down 126th Street in Harlem, then there's a problem. Because now you can't say that we all came over here on boats, because there was nobody with slave ships 4,000 years ago bringing black people to America. So we're going to have to reinvestigate that. We're going to go into the details of the information. Next book, Master Code book by Karl Monk. This is going to go into pyramid building on this earth, why we built pyramids, where we built them first, and what was the purpose of it. We walk around and we go see the Pyramid of Giza, we go see the Sun Pyramid, we go to Chichen Itza and all these other places on the planet, and we say, wow, that's great. And then we have a tour guide and they're telling us, you know, all these particular things. When I went to, the first time I went to Mexico in 2004, I have, of course, had a lot of knowledge about the Teotihuacan civilization, the Olmecs, the Mayans. So I knew that they were black folk, and specifically that their proper names were the Turushi or the Amaru, or, you know, the indigenous names. We knew this. We knew these were Moorish civilizations. So I went there, and of course, you had one of the people who were running the tour said that they were Quiche Mayans. But the only problem was he was white. Now, when I look at the glyphs, and I see people that are my tone of skin, which is very dark tone, and then I look at him and I see he's white, the question I gotta ask is, how did the Olmecs or the Mayans get white? Today, and thousands of years ago, when we see them in the carvings, the stones, and the actual painted glyphs, they look like so-called Afro-Brazilians or Afro-Americans. This is the racism that's permeating, and we cannot deal with our nationality properly and our political status properly with other people controlling our history. We want to be from everywhere else except the ground that's under our feet. And we've been here, so we need to start learning why we put these monuments and other things here. And our ancestors knew that we put these monuments here for specific purposes, right? There's eons of history in these monuments, and we need to learn why they're here. We need to learn why we placed them here, and they're not there for decoration. They're there for scientific reasons. There have been many cataclysms on this planet, and we were smart enough to know how to stabilize the planet with these particular monuments. And this is not a new age pseudoscience. This is a real science that we're going to get into tonight. All right, so we're covering some of the books. Again, that was by Karl Monk. I have other books here, but those are the 5 main ones we're going to use tonight. Let's start chopping this up. And before we go into chopping this up, let me say a few other things. There are a lot of people that have been trashing our society and saying, you know, y'all can't represent the Moors, and, you know, y'all not in any way associated. And, you know, I haven't been on Blog Talk Radio. This is my first time in the capacity of speaking out as one of the ministers of the International Society of Indigenous Sovereignty. There's a lot of things that have been said about us. We'll cover those things, not tonight, on another level. But I want to say this. We are here to edify each other, brothers and sisters. And all this attempting to tear each other down that I've heard on Blog Talk Radio being done by us is only because we have no vision and no focus. So we need to actually start getting some focus and some vision so we can build ourselves up properly. All right. So this is about edification. This is not about any other thing. So now let's start out with these theories. Now, the first area I'm going to start out with is some research that you can go further to verify some of the things that I'm going to say. We know from conventional Orthodox studies that the alleged oldest civilization in the Americas, Orthodox scholars call the Olmec civilization. All right? The Olmec civilization, centered in Central America, at La Venta and other places in Central America, is considered to be about 1,500 to 3,000 years old by conventional archaeologists. All right, and of course, they have connected this particular group of people to people who have so-called Negroid features, because when you see the huge stones, the large noses, you know, oh man, that's black folk. There can be nobody else phenotypically. All right, great. But we have a problem. The problem is not that, you know, we can easily verify who the people are. You know, the Olmec, we see the phenotypes, we see those particular things. Problem is when there's an opportunity to dig further and to find out information about the particular civilization, there is a tendency amongst so-called African-American scholars to try to make everybody from Africa, based on the Louis Leakey theory and the whole Orthodox white Eurocentric theory that we all evolved from apes. So now what you have is, anytime you find anybody on the planet, anywhere else, they have to be African. Now, there's a problem with that. There's a serious problem with that, and I got to start off there because nothing I say will make sense if I don't start out there. And starting out there is a good place to start because we're going to break up a lot of BS or baloney. Now, take in mind that I'm not insulting anybody. I'm not trying to denigrate our scholars, but I want to make it clear. To attempt to make all Aboriginal people who are phenotypically black and brown fallen under the historical status of African is a mistake that has been guided by two groups of people. One, ignorant people who just go to universities created by white folks who follow the systematic structure of white supremacy. That's one. And the second group are those who are more learned amongst these so-called black people or the white people who want to cover and hide history. And they do this intentionally. So you got an ignorant group and you got the group that's carrying out the phenomena intentionally. Now we did a presentation on this. It's called the Aboriginal Paradigm versus the CIA Columbia University controlled Afrocentricity. And we broke down a lot of things about the repatriation movement and the use of the term African, how it came out of the Prince Hall Lodge, and how this was an attack on history. Now, for all of you who might not have access to large amounts of books and volumes and be able to travel, I want you to do something if you're on the phone now or later on. Go to Google and type in the word Africa province. And what's going to happen is you might get some resources of some sort that give you the history of the use of the term Africa. And what you're going to find out is that it was white folk who created the first African province, all right, in 146 BC. And they did this after they conquered some of your ancestors who we call Carthaginians under the Carthaginian Empire. It's not, Carthage is not the name, the true name. They were the people of Punt or Topton West, or the puny people, or so-called, where we get the Greek use of puny or Phoenician. These were Moors. were Aboriginals, but in 146 BC, the Romans conquered a small province and named it African Proconsularis. And after naming Africa Proconsularis, these white Romans colonized that particular area and became the first Africans. Now that might sound crazy to you, but it's historically a fact that the first Africans were white, and white folks, white Romans made up that particular name. The Aboriginal and indigenous peoples of that particular landmass never called themselves Africans. So to call yourself African today is a term that denotes that you are colonized and do not know your history. Now, you might not be able to stomach that, but it is a fact. All right, so we need to check this information out for ourselves. And we will find that the first coins were African coins with white faces on them. You'll find emperors like Emperor Hadrian and others who were white Romans who were considered African. Now we have 54, 55 countries on that particular continent, all with pretty much so-called phenotypically black leaders. And they are all controlled by white people, financially, etc. A lot of us over here, we cry about land, we need land. You can't be sovereign without land. You can't go to Africa and say our people don't got no land. They got more land than you can think of. But it goes to show you can have all the land that you want. If you don't have your mind, you are still a slave. If you don't have your mind, you are still a slave. And we have 55 nations walking around calling themselves after a colonized term given to them by ancient Romans till this day. That is suicide, genocide, and menticide. All right, so we have to check that. If we are going to be a free people, how are we going to be free if we name ourselves after our enemies? Now, it was Andre 3000 who made the song. When he was dealing with the oxymoron. On the obverse of that, we reject the term American. All right? Under the guise that Amerigo Vespucci named the continent that particular name. That is another false or frivolous story. I will give you sources because I don't like to play. John Boyd Thatcher wrote a 6,000-page analysis of Columbus's journals, journeys to the so-called New World, and Amerigo Vespucci's journeys to the New World. John Boyd Thatcher, early 1900s. And he translated the letters of the alleged Amerigo Vespucci. And what we find out in those letters, in those original Latin letters, that the man's name was not Amerigo Vespucci. His name was Albericus Vespucci. That is Albericus. And when you read these particular letters and look around, you say, okay, well, how did his name get to be Americos? And then he just have this belief that he was named, or the land was named after him. This is what you call the science of colonization. Now, when they came to South America, during the time period of Central America, they knew the name of the people who called themselves Amaru. And in Columbus's own journal, when you go to his first page, he tells you on that first page of his own journal, type in Columbus Journal, go to the first page, he said that the leaders or the rulers in this part of the world were called Khan. We spell that like Farrakhan, Khan. And the Amaru Khan were the leaders who we call, or the Aboriginal leaders or chiefs or kings, who we call the Mayan kings, the Olmec kings, etc. The pre-Inca civilization. The Incas came along, who are another foreign group of Hindus who came into our civilization, and they began to take on the name Amaru. So this is why you see names like Tupac Amaru amongst their chiefs. They borrowed the language from the indigenous people. So the word American comes from the indigenous people. It does not come from Amerigo's Vespucci. The name was not named after him, right? That's important for us to know. So we got it backwards. We love African and hate American when we should hate American and love, we should hate African and love American. American is, in its phenotypical language, Aboriginal and Indigenous. And when you see that term Amaru, Amaru is where we get that phonetic more from, MR, when you take the vowels out. All right, so when Noble Drew Ali told us that we were at home, he wasn't joking, because we are at home. And Alkebalan, or Kush, or Tapenwet, or Tamaray, and that.
Let me pause it. Did you not just hear him give praise to Noble Drew Ali? This is 2012. So let me go back a little bit. Boom.
When the leaders who we call, or the Aboriginal leaders, or chiefs, or kings, who we call the Mayan kings, the Olmec kings, etc., the pre-Inca civilization. The Incas came along, who are another foreign group of Hindus who came into our civilization, and they began to take on the name Amaru. So this is why you see names like Tupac Amaru amongst their chiefs. They borrowed the language from the indigenous people. So the word American comes from the indigenous people. It does not come from Amerigo's Vespucci. The name was not named after him, right? That's important for us to know. So we got it backwards. We love African and hate American when we should hate American and love, we should hate African and love American. American is, in its phenotypical language, Aboriginal and Indigenous. And when you see that term Amaru, Amaru is where we get that phonetic more from, MR, when you take the vowels out. All right, so when Noble Drew Ali told us that we were at home, he wasn't joking, because we are at home. And Alkebalan, or Kush, or Tapenwet, or Tamaray, in the various jurisdictions, is also our home. But you can't be home calling it the name that the colonizer gave it. So you go check the information, Africa Province, yourself. Go type in John Boyd Thatcher, look it up yourself. Go to our website, get some of my DVD presentations. We've done several of those, come to some of our classes in various jurisdictions throughout the United States of America. All of our ministers have access to this information. You can get it, no matter where you're in so-called Tennessee, so-called Georgia, so-called North Carolina, so-called New Jersey, so-called Pennsylvania, so-called New York, all the way over to so-called. We got people everywhere who have this information. Get it. Also check out our website, www.wetheaboriginalpeople.com. So we established that. Now, jumping back to the scholars who try to make everything African, that's why they do that, because they are colonized. So as much as I love Taharka Rashad, him going to all these indigenous peoples trying to tell them that they're African, come on, this is a joke. This is a joke. You can't make everybody the name of the colonizer. Right? So that becomes a serious problem for us, because now we can't even think through the language to see who we are in our global connection as Aboriginal people. And this is why we started the International Society of Indigenous Sovereigns with the 8 Aboriginal Moorish tribal governments that composed it, because we wanted our people to understand you can't force names on people that it doesn't belong to, right? So we gotta get away from these colonized names, because what they do is they distort our perception of history. In our Supreme Wisdom lessons, when I was first coming into the FOI, we had to ask the question, why does the devil call our people African? Right? It was the devil who called our people African first. When I say devil, I'm not talking about a spook. I'm talking about a real colonizer who used that particular name. So we thank Master Brah Muhammad for giving us that information in the 30s that most of our scholars just skipped over. Dr. Ben didn't skip over it. And the Black Man of the Nile and his family, he put it right up inside the book on page 47, that the name Africa is a name given by the Greeks and the Romans. over that and love other parts of the teacher, but we want to deal with that side because that side takes us into our political reality. We can't walk around with the names of other people when we should be carrying our indigenous and aboriginal names. All right, so with that being said, you can't make the Olmec African because there was no such thing as an African when the Olmec existed. In fact, there was no. We skip over that and love other parts of the teacher, but we want to deal with that side because that side takes us into our political reality. We can't walk around with the names of other people when we should be carrying our indigenous and aboriginal names. All right, so with that being said, you can't make the Olmec African because there was no such thing as an African when the Olmec existed. In fact, there was no such thing as an Olmec. The Olmec called themselves the Tutu Shi. All right, well, the Shia. Well, when they pluralized it, it was the Ashia, all right, or Asia. And they had various jurisdictions on the planet, not just in Central America, but we go over to the other part of the planet, in so-called China, they had the Xi'an province, which are the oldest site of pyramids in Asia. And when we say Ashian or Asia, we're saying Asia. All right? So when the prophet Noble Drew Ali said we are Asiatics, adding the Latinized ick to it, to denote possession, why do people get mad? All right? So we have to not get caught up into emotion and get caught up into real scientific research. We are the ancient Aboriginal people. We are the Asiatics. All right? And we never use the planet's name to name ourselves. We always name jurisdictions after our own nature and our own name. So to name yourself after a piece of land is kind of backwards. All right, so let's keep it moving. All right, so we want to establish for the record that you can't call yourself by the name of your colonizers if you have sense. And I know we have lost some of our sense, so we got to get it back. Let's jump into the first book. The first book, The Message of the Engraved Stones of Ether. All right, now I'm going to break down real quick for you on this show some very important information about the hoax of how old humanity is. Because according to conventional scholarship, modern human beings should never show up in any records beyond maybe 200,000 years. Modern human beings are given the so-called scientific name Homo sapiens. And they are allegedly preceded by older forms of beings called Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Australopithecus. These are the so-called ancestors of modern man. All right. Western, well, I can't even say Western, white archaeology and black archaeologists who follow as the white archaeologists basically state that these hominids and these human beings, have certain dates or ages to them. All right. So we're going to go through some of these dates so you can understand these periods of time. They basically break the eras down into 3 eras: the Cenozoic, Mesozoic, and Paleozoic. Now, I'm not going to say I agree with these particular things at all because we have studied these things meticulously and we found errors in them. But we're going to use them just to prove all of these erroneous theories as false. The Cenozoic period is broken down into 7 periods. The Mesozoic is 3 periods, and of course the Paleozoic is 7 periods. And inside of these periods, you have the appearance of certain things going on, allegedly. For instance, over 5 million years ago, you shouldn't have the appearance of any people of modern type going on in any place. In fact, in the Jurassic period, which is about 213 million years ago, an archaeologist will argue with you down to the bone and say, oh, no, you'll never find evidence of any human being anywhere. on the planet. And during the Jurassic period, this is the time period you had these so-called large reptiles that we call dinosaurs, which you find in bones and other things of. But we want to show you from the message of the engraved stones of Ica, depictions of people interacting with these Jurassic period animals. This is why you need to get this particular book. Now, the interesting thing about this is nowhere on the earth do you find this type of depiction. Nowhere. And the reason why that becomes important is because it deals with how old is humanity, what are we going to use to engage that particular subject. One of the books that I'm going to recommend for you, just for your study, which is going to lead right into what we're about to talk about right now, is a book called The Mayan Calendar and the Transformation of Consciousness. It's by a man named Carl Johan Kalaman, The Mayan Calendar and the Transformation of Consciousness. Now, why this is important is because of one thing. Now, we know that the name is not Maya. We call them Amaru. These are Moors. These are the Shi people, the Shia people. And both the Olmec and the Maya are actually the same people, but archaeologists have given them different names, because that's their job. They divide and they separate because, the Mayan calendar and the transformation of consciousness. It's by a man named Carl Johan Kalaman, The Mayan Calendar and the Transformation of Consciousness. Now, why this is important is because of one thing. Now, we know that the name is not Maya. We call them Amaru. These are Moors. These are the Shi people, the Shia people. And both the Olmec and the Maya are actually the same people, but archaeologists have given them different names, because that's their job. They divide and they separate. Johan Kalaman, The Mayan Calendar and the Transformation of Consciousness. Now, why this is important is because of one thing. Now, we know that the name is not Maya. We call them Amaru. These are Moors. These are the Shi people, the Shia people. And both the Olmec and the Maya are actually the same people, but archaeologists have given them different names, because that's their job. They divide and they separate because, and it's not only in their nature, but, that's a part of their behavior to control the information. So we know from looking at the Bonham-Peck steles what the Mayans phenotypically look like and depicted themselves as. When you go to the Bonham-Peck steles or any other steles that the Mayans had, or the Olmecs, or the Zapotecs, or any of these other groups, what you find very clearly is that they are phenotypically black and brown people. They painted those murals thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, and they're still there for us today for those who travel to go and see them. You can go, if you can't travel, go right to your computer, type in Bonham-Peck, Bonhampek, steles, Mayans, and you will get some of the pictures that are available online. We placed a lot of those online from being down there and researching. All right, so it leads us to the point of a particular calendar amongst the Moorish Aboriginal Black people in Central America. And this particular calendar is found in the Yucatan at a place called Cuba. And archaeologists will call the monuments Coba Steles. That's Stelae. And when you go travel, to go and see them. You can go, if you can't travel, go right to your computer, type in Bonham-Peck, Bonhampek, steles, Mayans, and you will get some of the pictures that are available online. We placed a lot of those online from being down there and researching. All right, so it leads us to the point of a particular calendar amongst the Moorish Aboriginal Black people in Central America. And this particular calendar is found in the Yucatan at a place called Cuba. And archaeologists will call the monuments Coba Steles. That's Stelae. And when you go to Stele Box.
So again, you just heard him make reference to or referring to the people the ancient people of the Americas as Moors, right? 2, 3, 4 times already. So like I said, this unnecessary slander that's going back and forth, it's a thorn in a black eye to all of us. The atmosphere, it needs to be more about how can we assist one another to get everybody up to par, get the scholarship up so that the people, can be confident in their stance. And this will also help us come together when we need to come together to accomplish things that need to be accomplished. Point blank, like I said, I'm not looking to live on some type of a reservation type community, where we all stuffed in together and all of that. Although I know a lot of brothers and sisters promote that, that's not what it is. We come from ancient people who dealt with astronomy and they traveled by the stars. They didn't sit long, sit in any one place for long periods of time because it was work to do, just like it's still work to do now. There are various people that deal with agriculture and things like this and that within our genealogy. You know what I'm saying? And you know how that go. You're going to have people who are going to actually be caretakers of the land in one particular territory. And I'm not knocking that either. I'm just not, trying to live, I don't know. It just, the idea of it, for me, it just sounds too much like some reservation shit. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't sound like, for me, again, it doesn't sound like, something that, if we talking about nations, we talking about nationhood. You know what I'm saying? We talking about nationality. And that deals with the entire, you know what I mean? It deals with, if I'm talking about nationality, I'm talking about, well, I'm an American. You understand? At the same time, you have people of modern descent or European descent who are claiming to be Americans as well. But when you look back into the ancient artifacts here in the Americas, you see them nowhere. Nowhere to be found. But yet, once again, they run within and without the mother plane, making claims of being Americans. And I just don't understand that, being that they have these very racist ways, very white supremacist type of ideologies without even saying it, right? And once again, what I always wonder is this: if white is so superior, you know what I mean? You would have to be talking about what Germany, Russia, England, France, all of this and that, right? So if white is so superior, why do they keep attempting to claim to be Americans when they're not? Why don't they want to go back home to Ireland and England and Scotland and Germany, where their great superior white people come from? Think about that. So white, so great, so supreme. If I felt this way, it's nowhere in the fuck I wouldn't want to go home to where the white supreme superiority, bloodlines come from. But after all, they not superior worth a fuck. They're actually the recessive people, not the superior people. So I don't get that for the life of me. They definitely need to put the white supremacy down. You know what I mean? Go home with that shit. It's not your land. Not your land.
Which is actually a totem. The Maya have a particular calendar that's broken down and synchronized with time, days, periods to calculate years, and periods to calculate larger groups of years. The calendar is broken down into days, which are called kins. Right? Our ancestors broke this calendar down. Yunos, which is a 20-day period. 18 yunos equal 360 days, plus a period that we call the Wayeb, which is a 5-day period, which equals a year, which is called a tune. And when you take 20 tunes, you get a katun, 20, which is 20 years, approximately 7,200 days, which is about 100 days less than that period, the 20-year period. And 20 katuns equals almost a 400-year period, which we call a baktun. And 13 of those equal 13 baktuns where the cycle recycles the stuff. All right, so we got a 400-year cycle. Now, at Kova, they have a calendar that is 16.4 billion years old. Now, we have to scratch our head and ask ourselves a question. White folks tell us that the planet is only 4.5 billion years old. Who on earth would have a calendar 16.4 billion years old? In fact, it's the oldest calendar in the world, right here in the Americas, from black folks that we are descended from, that we know nothing about. 16.4 billion years of history etched into a totem to leave for you and me so we'll know who we are. And we are amazed and jumping around thinking we're from some monkeys that are 2 million or 3 million years old. This is the insanity that goes on. Because they're not going to tell you that the Maya are phenotypically black, and they're definitely not going to conventionally tell you that they're connected to the Aboriginal tribes of North America who are also phenotypically black, the Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Nazi, etc. And that they align their monuments to each other's monuments, meaning that they knew about each other. Therefore, we're dealing with one lineage of people who had a particular type of culture, a science and a math that was preserved amongst them. So when we look and say, who has the oldest calendar on the earth? The question is definitively answered by saying so-called black folk in the Americas have the oldest calendars on the planet. You got no calendars in Europe that are older. You got no calendars in Asia that are older. And there are definitely no calendars in Africa that are older. So now you can go and study for yourself. Get the book, go travel to the Yucatan to go for yourself, do some research, and find this calendar. And you will see the oldest calendar on the planet. It's called the Long Count Calendar. And both the so-called Olmec and the so-called Mayans had it. This is how we know that they are the same people. And not only that, they wrote down the same name for themselves, the Turu Sheep, which is the noble priesthood amongst these Aboriginals, or the Amaru. All right? Or the Amaru Muru. These were the words that they gave themselves. All right? So they left that calendar for us. So if you want to study, you will find that this is the oldest calendar in the world. All right. So any arguments on that will have to be made with our ancestors because they left that for us. And if anybody can find a calendar that's older than that, 16.4 billion years ago, then hey, I would love it. Bring it on. All right. And we'll be able to argue with you down to the wire to prove that we were here for a long, 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 long time, brothers and sisters. Longer than white folks can even write down in their archaeological books. All right. So You need to study that information. Now, with that being said, 16.4 billion years of history, when you're using the scale of time to go back into years, the geological eras and the periods, the Cenozoic, the Mesozoic, the Paleozoic. The Paleozoic is the oldest and only goes back to 590 million years. So now the Mayans have a calendar that stretched beyond the modern ability to even calculate the things that they try to calculate in the fossil records and the early microbes and the evolution of life. This goes to show that the whole theory of evolution is a joke. We are thinking that we are evolving and we are actually devolving. How can a people that eat McDonald's every day evolve? It's a joke. Right? So we need to kind of get ourselves in perspective to see who we are, because we're too arrogant. We think that we are advanced. We're not advanced. And there's civilizations that have been and still are more advanced than us. In the sense of us, meaning us who are thinking we're in the modern epic and advanced, being advanced. Now, the thing about the book that I mentioned, The Message of the Engraved Stones of Ica, if you type it into your search engine, you will get a website of one brother that put a lot of images up. You won't get the book, of course, but you'll get some images. And inside of these images, what you will find out is that these Amaru people, corresponding with the Mayan calendar that they were already here, depicted themselves interfacing with the Jurassic prototypical animals, Jurassic meaning dinosaurs. I have in the book that I'm looking at right now, 27 glyphs etched into a stone that is called andesite, used to depict these particular things. All right. The other part of this discussion that is important is not only do they depict Jurassic animals, and Jurassic animals would have lived, according to modern data, 213 million years ago. They're the only ones on the planet that depict these particular things and carvings and etched glyph work that is not Paleolithic in the sense of made by people who are not necessarily at the level of intelligence that we are. No, these are glyphs that are very clear, that you can see, and they are beautiful pieces of artwork that, according to modern standards, would be 213 million years old. Find me somebody on the earth that has that. You won't find it. Not only that, you say, well, maybe they're false. Maybe the stones and the etchings are false that are in this particular book that I'm mentioning The Message of the Engraved Stones of Ica. Well, that was purported. So the author, who actually was a part of the discovery of the stones, and they had almost 20,000 of these stones that were found in Ica, Peru, sent them to be tested. All right? And when he sent them to be tested, the author, of course, here is Dr. Javier Cabrera Darquilla. He took 33 of the stones and he took them. He had a friend that was called Louis Hachal of the Mauricio Hachal Mining Company based in Lima, Peru. So he sent them to the laboratory to get them to be tested, and they were tested by a geologist by the name of Eric Wolf. And he basically made a statement that's a part of this book. I want to read it. He basically said, this is unquestionably natural stone shaped by fluvial transport. Petrologically, I would classify them as andesites. Andesites are rocks whose components have been subjected mechanically to great pressure, which causes chemical changes to take place. In this case, the effects of the intense purification are obvious. This process has increased the compactness in specific ways. And he confirms that he would send them to the University of Bonn in West Germany. And he basically states that the rocks are from the Mesozoic era, which would align with the third era or the second era of the Mesozoic era, the Jurassic era, 213 million years ago. All right, so now we have the rocks being tested. Now, andesite is a stone that develops from volcanic rock. And on the scale, on the mole scale, which is a scale that's used to test the hardness of rocks, the rocks come up harder than granite. which means that in order to make the carvings into the stones and the etchings, which are actually pieces of art, right, artwork that are very detailed and actually very beautiful in the way that they look. They're not, caveman type of carvings. They're very artistic. The archaeological report says that the people would have to have carbon steel, diamond cutting materials, or possibly even lasers. Now, who do you know 213 million years ago, when there was supposed to be no human beings, could be using that type of technology? So right here in the Americas, you had that going on. According to even the modern data, at least 213,000 years ago during the Jurassic era. And not only that, they made depictions of how they physically look. I'm holding a book right now, and on the front page, you have one of the stones that depicts one of the chiefs with full garb on, with a telescope looking up into the stars, and the stars are etched onto the top of this particular stele. Who had telescopes this far, or this far back in history? There's no depictions of anybody with telescopes. So our question remains, what type of advanced civilizations existed millions and millions and millions of years ago right here, when we don't find this type of information anywhere else in the world? Not only did they leave this particular type of information, but they left maps that show the tectonic plates before certain levels of cataclysm occurred on the planet. Now, many of us learn about civilizations that we call Atlantis and Lemuria and other things, and there have been proposed ways of how they look. These particular people left these particular maps, and they showed the continents when they were connected, when the plates were slid together. All right? So we have, according to the research that we've done, we know that there were certain levels of cataclysms that caused the tectonic plates to slide. The information is verified, but this is prior to those cataclysms that mostly would have happened 12,900 years ago, 10,000 BC. They gave us maps that old. No one else has maps prior to that particular period. So again, we're dealing with evidence, very, very clear evidence of very ancient material. All right. So now we have the oldest calendar. Then we have the oldest glyph writing. The oldest glyph writing today is found in Ica, Peru, on these particular stones, which make depictions of the constellations. It identifies them. It makes depictions of what the people look like. It gave depictions of the animals living during that particular time, over 17 different types of so-called prehistoric animals, which were cross-checked with the fossil record to verify that these depictions on the stones match those particular animals. So we have to ask ourselves a question, brothers and sisters. If all this information is coming up, and we had so-called esoteric teachers like Prophet Noble Drew Ali and others who came and taught us parts of this information, is it erroneous or is it false? Since we know for a fact that this particular information exists and it's been tested, and you can't even get this book in the United States, the signature line spells conspiracy. And the conspiracy states and denotes that there's somebody who does not want you to understand global history as it was recounted by these particular Aboriginals. And it's not by coincidence that our ancestors were able to further calculate using their calendric system and having the knowledge of earth sciences and having other levels of knowledge that are far more advanced than we could ever imagine. Is not by coincidence they were able to predict the rise and fall of the very civilization that we are a part of into a calendar that we call the Mayan calendar, which is really a Moorish calendar, or calendar of the Amaru, or the Ashia, the Asiatics. These particular things cannot be argued. We are seeing the earth go through these particular things. All right. So when we are talking about verifying this information, we have it. The next level of verification that I want to go to is our actual cities that were found. I'm going to give you some more books. In the late 1800s and the early 1900s, I see somebody's hand up. I'm going to come to you in a minute. I want to just get this last a little bit of archaeology information, then we can kind of get into some other information. William Nivens, who wrote a few books, studied in the Valley of Mexico, and in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, he wrote several materials documenting cities that go back to the Pleistocene era. Now, I'm not talking about stone carvings and low flints and stone. I'm talking about cities with buildings and artwork in them. He found the home of a goldsmith who sold jewelry. Now, the Pleistocene era, according to modern archaeologists, the Pleistocene era goes back to how far back? Approximately 11 million to 2 million years ago. You had cities in Mexico that William Nivens found in and around Mexico City. Materials that he wrote on these particular things and where you can find them. Again, this information is rare, brothers and sisters. You're not going to get this by just running down to the library. You have to travel places to get this particular information. Some of it I have, and I make it available to the people who come to the classes in New York, so-called New York and so-called Philly and Shaker Mexican. We make these available, all right? One of the books is called Among the Mound Builders in Unexplored Guerrero, which is in Mexico. If you want to get this book, you can travel to Ohio at the Ohio Historical Society in Columbus, Ohio. That's the only place you're going to find this writing by William Nivens talking about these cities that are millions of years old, that were covered by volcanic ash, showing that they suffered a cataclysm that caused their ultimate demise. Another book is called Photographs from the Stele of Guerrero, Mexico, at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. Now, I've been here and I've seen this book. And what he does is he shows the actual murals left on the walls of these particular cities that have been preserved. And on the murals, you see black people. Now, you're not supposed to see black people in cities that are buried under the mountains that are in the Pleistocene era that are between 11 million to 2 million years old. You're not supposed to see this. But it's there in Mexico. So why are we trying to make the Olmecs as coming from Alkebulan or Africa when they themselves said where they came from, including their descendants, the Turushi, which we call the so-called Maya or the Amaru. They said where they came from. Now, I got bombed on this one. You had Sarah Sutanseti bombing it. You had Ishmael Allah bombing it, saying that Mu was a mythical city. When I have been to Mesoamerica and read the glyphs myself at the pyramid of Zaki Calco and other pyramids, where these particular people said that their descendants were from a landmass to the west of them that they call Mu. It's in the glyphs. It's been interpreted and translated several times by several different scholars. And not only that, these further records that I'm showing you verify it. And not only that, we provided the people with a map from Ica, Peru, and showed these particular continents, which means somebody wanted to leave these records for us. All right. So another book that you can get on William Nivens is called Buried Cities and Forgotten Gods by Robert Wicks. And in this particular book, he goes through and breaks down his dig that he did in the Valley of Mexico, and he found 3 levels of cities, one in the Pleistocene area and one in the Tertiary. Now, the rabbit hole gets deeper, because when you calculate how old the Tertiary era is, you have a problem. The Tertiary era goes back 63 million years, according to modern archaeology. Now, this man, William Nivens, was considered one of the most renowned archaeologists of his time. And there's people like the James Churchward, and other New Agers who wrote books off of his information. But William Nivens, who was considered an orthodox archaeologist, made these findings and made these reports and these rare books that you can't get anywhere. You got to travel all across the United States to even see these particular books that I'm mentioning. Photographs from the state of Guerrero, Mexico in 1895, which is at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. That's the only place that you can find that particular book. And among the mound builders in unexplored Guerrero at the Ohio Historical Society in Columbus, Ohio, that's the only place that you can find that book. You will find depictions of what's in those books, again, in this book, Buried Cities and Forgotten Gods by Robert Wicks. And of course, the city that I'm mentioning, they found bones of Homo sapiens in this particular city, buried under volcanic ash in the Tertiary era, 63 million years ago. Somebody speak to me. Somebody holler black at me. How did black folk depicted on the murals found the bones with the Negroid genetic markers on the bones, which are reported by Nivens, in the Valley of Mexico 63 million years ago, with cities and buildings that got crumbled by some type of cataclysm? Talk black to me. So when we talk about these Amaru, and we talk about the Turushi, so-called Olmec, so-called Maya, 16.4 billion year calendar, cities before the mountains even developed on the earth, we have hard archaeological evidence that prove that we are the oldest people, not only on this landmass, but the oldest people on the planet. Right here in the hills of North America, in the hills of Central America, in the hills of South America, calling ourselves Afro-Brazilian, Afro-Peruvian, African-American, completely denationalized, with no knowledge of self, and with nobody to bring us this information. So this is the purpose of the International Society of Indigenous Sovereigns and the various Moorish tribes, tribal governments that make it up, is to make this information available to you, the people who nobody loves, nobody want to tell you the truth, everybody want to make you their religious slave or scholastic slave with a new religion called Afrocentricity, or even more, creating new religions. When the prophet was a scientist studying history, now you got to be a part of the Moorish Science Temple or some fake Marrakesh empire in order to be a Moor. Please, you were born with that birthright, and all you have to do is organize yourself around the right information and then carry it on into your civic endeavors, and you will change the globe back to what it's supposed to be. All right, so William Nivens, get your studying on. Going further, before I answer this call that's coming up, I want to talk about the radiocarbon dating, the dendrochronology, thermoluminescence dating, other types of dating, numenistics, potassium argon dating. These are all so-called dating measures that white folks use to date things. Now I'm going to give you an idea of how erroneous these dating techniques are, and how, if they don't know Aboriginal history, they can't date anything. When they want to test a monkey or a hominid like Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis, you get a certain type of testing done on that particular animal, right? And that particular type of testing is called potassium argon dating, which, for those who want to make it simple, and through my study of anatomy and my specialization in the human body, I'm able to make this very simple for you so that you don't need 1,000-page books to understand this information. Potassium is an element in your body. Every cell in your body needs potassium. All right, you get potassium from your sea vegetables and other things. In the cell, you have what's called the sodium-potassium pump. Potassium is very alkaline. And when you have large amounts of potassium in the cell, and you are kicking out the sodium, which is the waste, you keep the cell alkaline, which it means it's healthy, it's strong. And then it has a proper charge on the membrane of the red blood cell or the skin cell or anything else. So high levels of potassium keep the field of energy around the cell healthy. Now, the potassium argon dating is a method to test how long it takes the mineral element potassium to decay into the mineral element argon. All right, which it takes, it would take a pretty long time to do that. All right, but keep this in mind. The earth and the cells of the body are the same. The earth and the cells of the body are the same. The earth has a magnetic field. The cells have a magnetic charge around their cellular membrane. So the principle of life is simple. The cells have mitochondria. They spin at a certain rate of speed. They create a field around the cell. It keeps the charge healthy. It stops aging. It stops decay. If you can keep it healthy. If you eat French fries every day, the potassium levels drop. Your cells start decaying. And they start decaying into other mineral elements, what scientists will call beta decay. All right? The Earth is the same way. The Earth right now, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, is losing its magnetic field. So as the Earth's magnetic field goes down, your magnetic field goes down in your cells. There's a study done.
Yo, and with that, we're going to say peace. Have to get back later on. So peace and love, everybody. Yeah.